claim I'll be refuting today is that women in combat roles are detrimental to infantry units in America. The advocate has supported three secondary claims, which were that women's physical abilities are different than males, causing them to be unable to perform the same task as their male counterpart. The other ones are that integrating women into infantry units will increase sex-related conflicts within a unit. And third, that mixed units decrease unit cohesion. In response to the first secondary claim, the advocate stated that 0 out of 29 women who took the Marine Corps Infantry Officer course had all failed. However, the Washington Post reported that these women that take the course are only allowed to take it once and could not repeat it, while men are allowed to retake it as many times as they want. Therefore, and also that men who pass the course are usually not on their first attempt, meaning they're on their second or even more further attempt. So this results in the statistic for women to be skewed in a way, that because women cannot retake it, therefore they are not if they were able to take it a second time, perhaps they'd be more prepared and more better trained to pass the course again. The advocate also started talking about how women are not able to meet the physical requirements, such as being able to carry a 100-pound or 180-pound man and 100 pounds of ammunition. However, he provided no statistical evidence to confirm this claim, and instead started leading into how it was unfair for men to be substituted for women in a combat unit, without discussing further into why women were incapable of functioning in military units. For his second secondary claim, it involved the possibility of sexual tension between men and women in a unit. The advocate stated that if men and women are together for long periods of time, their hormones would inevitably get the best of them. To quote Jessica Scott, who is an active duty Army officer and an instructor at the United States Military Academy at West Point, she stated in regards to this, that we need to stop acting like women are some kind of aliens who cause men to become hormone-driven Neanderthals and expect professionalism out of both men and women. Like any other work environment, men and women are perfectly capable of keeping their emotions intact and not start jumping on each other at any given chance. The advocate has offered no proof to the claim that people cannot control themselves when around the opposite sex, but instead provides only hypothetical situations. For his third secondary claim about mixed units will decrease cohesion, the third claim is based on the idea that relationships will form between men and women that are members of the same unit, and this will ruin the unit's cohesion. However, there were no indicators that cohesion was affected by any way. All that's stated is that the cohesion will decrease, but he didn't explain how. The assumption is that the male members of the unit would start to compete for the attention and affection of the female in their group, and this would start to cause drama within the unit. According to Marine protocol, though, if there was in fact any drama within a unit, the commanding officer usually steps in and starts to deal with the situation to ensure that the unit continues to function as a whole. This would be no different if there was drama within an all-male unit. So even if, no matter what the issue is, the commanding officer usually will step in. So if there's a woman involved or all men involved, it wouldn't be any different. The advocate also stated that, in his words, that having to respect and have faith in someone who has lower standards to you in a unit will decrease unit cohesion. This statement appears to be more of a personal opinion rather than evidence, especially since it's not connected to any source. And I suppose what he meant by standards is that women were supposedly put to a lower physical standard than males, but that is in fact not true, because women have to take the same amount of training courses as men do, and they have to pass the same tests as men do within units. There's an assumption being made that male soldiers will not trust female counterparts, and that this will cause them to lower cohesion. In conclusion, the advocates claim that women in combat roles are detrimental to infantry units in America was given through statements that were not supported by specific evidence to present a viable argument. His argument instead resulted in the generalizations that all women are weaker than men and that they will cause sexual tension and drama within their units, making it hard to accept the advocate's claim as fact.
All right, Derek, the structural stuff is great. You label the main proposition, you preview the secondary claims. As you get to each of the individual points, you remind us what the argument was. You give a little kind of summary of what their argument was and what the evidence consisted of. And I like that you made the extra effort to criticize the evidence that the advocate used. Sometimes you suggested there was something wrong with the way the evidence is portrayed. I especially like the example on 0 out of 29 women passed the one test, and then it turns out that men don't always pass the test on the first time either, and women aren't allowed to take the test a second time. So in essence, this is not a legitimate comparison. You can't really make this inference that they're incapable of doing this, since they weren't even measured in the same way as men were in this particular situation. I thought that was a good way of showing that the data that's being used by the advocate here is not accurate. I think you might also make a little bit of a generalization that at this particular point that demands that when people make proof or offer proof of these kinds of claims, that in fact they demonstrate that the examples are comparable, that they have the same standards that they're talking about, because otherwise you shouldn't be listening to their evidence. And then you can come back in other points and then kind of make that same argument. Say, did their evidence show that they were held to the same standard? Is there in fact a demand to be able to do these kinds of things? Was there any difference in these other places? Well, we know that in the one study they didn't even test them the same way. Here the advocate didn't present a study, or they alluded to a study, but we don't know if it met those criteria that are good. So that's just an extra way of maybe making your reasoning attack apply a little bit more outside of just the one context, but maybe in some other contexts as well. But I like that quite a bit. You challenge the lack of evidence on the advocate on that point about the physical abilities. It would have been nice if you had some evidence there that showed that women have been capable of meeting some of those requirements, carrying the 180 pounds or the 100 pounds of ammunition, if we had any data on that or examples. I mean, let's face it, the advocate had no evidence, and here are 6 cases of women who have been able to do that and should be allowed to serve in these units because they're capable of meeting that. If you had those examples, that would be in contrast to what the advocate presented. You guys are all, by the way, I've noticed that everybody's been very shy about mention. It's like it's verboten to mention the opponent's name. It's not. I mean, if you refer to them as the advocate, that's okay. But some of you had like the guy who said this or something like that. Most of them had names. That you could say, Daniel made this claim, and there's something wrong with the name. The claim that's being made, that sort of thing. You don't have to be shy about that. When we get into the debates at the end, you're going to have to talk about who you're talking about, because there are going to be 2 people on the other side. Which one of those people's arguments are you referring to? We're going to need to know that sort of thing. So it's okay. I thought the second point you did a pretty good job. You had a nice quote there that said, look, we have to change the way this, and it comes from somebody who's pretty credible about this. They're an active duty officer. They do instruction at West Point Military Academy. And who do we have on the other side who says that men and women can't control themselves? I'm sorry, nobody. So we think we can do this. And by the way, we have a history of people, men and women, who are working together where this has not been a problem. Sexual harassment exists in all kinds of contexts, but it's not any more prevalent here than it is going to be in colleges and universities where, oh my gosh, we let women into the classroom with the men, and there might be, they can't learn anything anymore because the women are in the classroom with them, and that kind of thing. I think you've got the right idea there. Again, I think you could probably use a little bit more evidence on your counterexample, since you're holding them to the standard that they ought to have evidence too. And then the press on cohesiveness, there's an explanation that the advocate gave. You kind of give an explanation also. I don't remember that either of you really had any evidence on this. This is like both of you are presenting your theories and your concepts on these points. And I thought you did a pretty good job explaining why your theory is reasonable. And then you've got a backup argument that says, look, if there is a problem, that's what the responsibility of the officer in charge is to take care of, and they are going to get on top of those things. Is it is it likely they're going to put somebody in charge who's not capable of handling, what amounts to high school crush behaviors and drama that's going on? These are people who lead forces into combat, who have trained. Some of them have trained hundreds, maybe thousands of soldiers in a variety of circumstances, and you don't think they'll know how to, put the kibosh on somebody, getting all alpha male with some other guy because they got a crush on some girl in their unit, that sort of thing. I think they'd be able to handle that pretty well. I like the idea of that. I just think you need to sell it a little bit more. All right. Thank you.